And welcome back. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create the basic Hello World Witty program using Komodo Edit. So let's go ahead and get started. I already have Komodo Edit up and running. And if you haven't seen our previous tutorials, I went ahead and showed you how to create this toolbar so you can clean your project, compile the project, debug it, run it if it's a standard C++ project. Run Cmake with it, and actually run the Witty server with it. The next thing I'm going to show you is here's the projects, and you would see this in a previous tutorial. And the first thing you're going to do is go into the project menu, click on New Project. Now you can put your Witty projects anywhere you desire. I'm going to go ahead and put in the Documents folder, and this is under Windows 7. And then go under Projects, Witty, and go ahead and create a brand new folder. And I'm going to call this Hello World, all one word. And then click on it and click on it again. And then I'm going to change the Komodo Edit project name to Hello World. And then press Save. Now, Komodo Edit is going to prompt you every time unless you check this, check this box saying don't ask me again. It's just telling you that, do you want to have a .komodo project extension? In our case, yes, we do. And that helps Komodo Edit know what the project ends with. And I'm just going to click on yes. I'm not going to check it because I kind of like that prompt. And as you can see in the left pane, it went ahead and created our project. There's nothing there. And if you click on this, you can see our folder structure that we did from the C drive all the way to Hello World. And then add the actual files. Double click on your Witty project, and that transfers all the files that we'll need to create our project. And then I'm going to click on this to hide the bottom pane. Then I'm going to click on the source folder. I'm going to do it twice. And then click on the header file, and there's no extension to it in my projects. And the first time you do this in Komodo Edit, the syntax highlighter is going to be text. All you have to do is click here on the bottom right hand side and just change it to C++, and you should be good to go. You probably might have to do it a couple of times, and then Komodo Edit will be smart enough to figure that you want to use a file with no extension as C++. Then the next thing you want to do is click on the source file, and then click on the main file. And the first file we're going to look at is the header file, though. And just go ahead and double click on it, and that'll get rid of all your panes. And then as you can see, we have our comments for our project. They had made some changes here. Today's not actually the 10th, it's actually the 16th, but I'm going to leave it as it is. And then you have your header files that that actually tells you that this is the Witty project. The first header is the Witty application. The best way I can describe this class is that it manages everything that you need to get Witty up and running. I kind of like the way that Qt describes the Qt application. Even though this is not a tutorial on Qt, it kind of gives a good explanation because, as you can tell, Witty is kind of was inspired by Qt. For the Qt application class, it kind of says it manages everything for your GUI application. You could say the Witty application kind of manages everything that you need for a Witty application, including the browser window, the controls, cookie management, state information, session information. And I'll just show you the list. But basically, it just, it handles all the widgets. And I'm looking at the documentation. You can't see it here, but basically it handles the environment class, which that handles the user information, startup arguments if you have any for your application, the user agent, which that includes the browser and the information involved in it, You can set the title of the application, set style sheets if you want to use cascading style sheets, handle JavaScript if you want to handle that, for the entire application. You can bind widgets with this. It actually has a root container, which is the root container widget, which I'll give a better explanation, but basically it allows you to add widgets to your application, your buttons, your text boxes, even layout information for your Witty application. You can set up cookies, especially through the environment class. You can enable server push updates. You can set Ajax with the application, with the Witty application class. You can even add resources, and you'll see some of that as we go along. The next class is really simple. It's called the Witty break widget, and all it does is it's like the HTML break tag. So if you're designing your web page and you need to put a break somewhere, like a paragraph somewhere or something like that, you can just use this class. Or you could go ahead and just manually do it in this Witty class right here, but we'll get to that. But basically, if you just want to add a break tag, this is the class that you would use. And then the next class is the Witty container widget. And let me see if I can pull that up. And basically all this is like a container object. It manages child widgets, and this is what it says in their documentation. It's a container. So if you want to add like buttons and text boxes and drop down boxes, tables, that's the actual class that you would use. So this is basically a widget that can contain other widgets. And you'll see a lot of this. You can even subclass this to create your own widgets. And then the next control is the line edit. This is basically, a widget that is basically a text box. They just call it a line edit, but basically it's a text box. And you can style it, you can format it any way you want to, and you'll see some examples of that as we go along. And then we have the push button. Pretty self-explanatory. You set the text to set the text on the button, and basically you can set the click event. You'll see that in a minute. They call it signals and slots, but basically you're setting events for this button for it to display something or react to some kind of external event somewhere once you click on the button. And then the next thing you have is the Witty Text. Basically you use this it's to display text. If you want to write JavaScript by hand, if you want to write JavaScript by hand, you would use this control. It's very versatile. It can display safe HTML, unsafe HTML, and like I said, you'll see a lot of this. It can do things that you normally wouldn't be able to do if some of these other classes were limiting. You would actually write HTML text box with this control, with this actual Witty Text class by hand if you wanted to. But you'll see examples of that as we keep going. And then basically all I did was qualify the namespace. You don't have to do that. If you want to, you can just go ahead and write Witty and use the scope resolution operator, or colon. That's basically what it is. And just do Witty colon Witty line edit, and then go ahead and just do your class and start writing your code out. But I went ahead and just qualified the namespace out. I subclassed and created our own Witty application. You don't have to do it this way. There's another way to do this, and you could do it all this way or the other way, and you'll see an example of that too. But I went ahead and just subclassed it. You could just go ahead and just use this Witty application by itself, but we subclassed it. And then the next bit of code is we created two private variables and a private method. This is basically a text box. This is basically the Witty Text class. It's basically, I like to call it a literal, where you can display text or any other information you want to display on the browser. And then they have their greet method, and this displays the greeting to the user. There's some functionality behind it, and you'll see that in a minute. And here's the constructor where we initialize all our widgets that we're going to use in the application. And you have to pass every Witty application has to have a Witty environment object passed to it, and that holds a slew of information I briefly went over. And you'll see more again. You'll see some of that as we go along. Then let's go ahead and look at the C++, the Hello Witty C++ file. All we did was include the header file that we have, and then here's the implementation of the method. Remember the method and the constructor, and there's the constructor. And this is just the implementation of what it actually does. If we look at the greeting method, all it's doing is saying, okay, take our Witty Text object or literal, set the text value of it to hello world, which is a string, and this is basically you say it's not a C++ string, but it's a Witty string. It could be a C++ string, and then we just concatenate it, and then add the name edit, the text value of the name edit, which is our text box. So we say hello world and whatever is in that text box. And that's basically all it does is just display a greeting onto the web page. So again, this is our literal. We set the text value of it to this text value and the value of the text box, the text value of the text box. And then we have the constructor itself. Now again, like I briefly mentioned, the Witty application, you can use it to set the title of the application, and we do that here. This method is part of the Witty application class, and we just set the title to hello world. And you'll see that in the browser window when we run the example. And then the next bit of information is the root object. And let me explain a little bit about this, not too much. Basically, every Witty application class and the object that you create from that class has a root Witty container. Remember I said a Witty container contains child widgets? Or every Witty application object and class has that root Witty container in it. You know, it's already initialized. All you have to do is just add whatever widgets like buttons, text boxes, that, you know, any kind of widgets like that to this control. So all we did here was we took the root object of the application and added a widget, and basically this is saying, okay, give us your name. We just took a Witty Text, the Witty Text class, and create a new instance of it. We didn't have to write out the actual variable. We just did it on the fly and just say your name, please. You know, your name, please. And then the next control after it, which would be on the same line in the browser, and you'll see that it's not on a new line in the browser. We just create a new. You know, we took our variable of our name in it, and we just went ahead and created it, and we gave it the parent of the root object because it can hold other Witty child controls. And then the next thing we did was we create a push button. Now we could have did this. We could have created this by itself in the header file, but in their example, they just went ahead and just created it instantaneously. And here's a new button. We set the text value to greet me, and we set the parent object to, you know, again, the root container. Then after that, we took another control, which is a paragraph, you know, a break. And once we did that, you know, basically you'll see on the page where you have your name, the text box, a button, all on the same line. And then you have a break, an HTML break. And then after that, then you would go ahead and create your greeting, which is your Witty Text. Again, give it the root object so it can be displayed on the page. I mean, a piece of advice, you can go ahead and create, like, say we take this button right here and we create it. We could create it as is without the root object. It'll be created, but guess what? It won't show up on the page. So you have to make sure that you give it a parent object, which is our root object, so it will be visible on in the actual browser window. And that's what we do here. So again, you have the Witty Text, and I apologize, but I want to make sure people understand this. So you have your display your name, the text box, a button, then you have an HTML break tag, and then you have your greeting that's going to be displayed under it. And then here's your button. After all of that, we set the signal and the slot, or basically an event, where we set the click event, and we just say, okay, it's part of this application, and here's the actual event that's going to be fired. And basically, when you click on the button, that is what happens. It goes ahead and shows the greeting onto the web page. So enough explanation. Let's go ahead and see if we can get this to run. So let's run Cmake, and that's pretty self-explanatory. It sets up all our make files. Let's compile it. I have a pretty fast computer. Let's see, we have some errors here. Let's see what's going on. Oh, I see. Well, we have our first error, which is a good thing. Let's see, what do we do? And I didn't even notice that. That's a common mistake. And I apologize for that. Okay, let's try it again. Let's compile again. Just had an extra I in the word include. No big deal. Okay, and as you can see, down here in my script that I created, once you see where it says one file moved, it automatically tells you that any file that we compiled is moved from the build folder to the product folder. And if we just expand this, I kind of made the file structure kind of like what it does on the Macintosh with the hello world.app, and then underneath all that is the actual executable file. And as you can see, here is the executable. We're not going to double click on the actual executable because you have to pass arguments to it. And that's why I created the script for the Witty server. And then the next thing you need to do is just click on the Witty server itself. And you can't see this because I have multiple monitors. But once you do your first project, or when you run it the first time, Windows is going to prompt you. Now the Witty server is not doing anything quite yet. You know, the Windows firewall is going to pop up. You just want to allow access. And now it is up and running. And what we want to do is I have Chrome. And the address for all our examples, most of the time, is going to be just localhost with port 9090. Press enter, and as you can see, there is the project. And as you see in the background, you can see that the Witty server went ahead and started doing what it needed to do. And again, let's click this. That's our output.txt. You can see everything was 100%. Let's close that. And again, I'm trying to make sure that this is understandable. Now, I didn't look at the main.cpp file, but I will in a second. Again, just so you understand, there's the root object. So if you look at this, there's an invisible root object here. And all you're doing is saying, okay, I'm going to add this widget, which is your name, please. Then we're going to add the line edit, and there's the line edit. Then we're going to create a button, and with README, and we add it to the root object. Again, it's like a invisible widget here on the page. And then you have your greeting, which you can't see, but it's kind of like underneath this. So if I go ahead and add my name, click on Greet Me, and there you go. It it went ahead and fired this event, hello world dot greet, I guess you could say, and it set the greeting text to hello there, and what was in that text box. I mean, you could put my name, you could put the name John, I mean, whatever you want to put in there. You could also do, excuse me for that, you could do Domino's Pizza if you wanted to. I'm not saying that anybody's a fan or not a fan of Domino's Pizza, but you could go ahead and put in that. I mean, whatever you want to put in that text box gets displayed onto the browser window. And that's basically, you know, your basic Witty application. Let's go ahead and look at the main.cpp file real quick. All we did here was, and you don't really need some of this, but we went ahead and added input-output, the hello world header file, the Witty server class. You'll need that because that's the actual server that gets initialized and runs. Again, I qualified the name. I went ahead and added the namespace for the standard C++ namespace. You don't have to do that. I know some people consider that bad practice. This right here is what actually gets run, and you'll see as I go along. There's another way. Again, you don't have to create these two files. You can actually do everything in the create application function, because see what it returns? Witty application. All I did was just subclass it and created our own and added that and passed in the environment variable, because it takes the same arguments. And you could really go ahead and just create the Witty application as an object itself in this function and do everything in here. But I just consider it much easier to go ahead and just subclass it and do all your objects, you know, in its own class file. It's just a whole lot easier. But I'll show you both ways. And then going back to main.cpp, only thing in here is just creating the server object, adding some configurations. You add in your arguments from the main file. Go ahead and add the application, the create application, because that adds the entry point for the application to start. You start it up and just wait for it to do it, you know, to do its thing. And once it's up and running, you know, you're good to go. And if there's any errors, it'll go ahead and display it in that, you know, in that console window. And so far we don't have any errors. And then if you want to just close the application, click on X, and that closes it down. And if you try to do this again, it's not going to do anything. And you can see it's kind of trying to do something, but you know, the server's not up and running. But that's basically it. That's how you create a basic Witty application. I hope this wasn't too long. I was trying to really do a good explanation of how Witty, you know, runs and how everything operates. And you know, as we go along, you'll see more and more examples of this very interesting framework, or not framework, library, and how to create web applications using C++. Until then, have a good day. Bye-bye.